Hello, and welcome to another video from HollyTreeEnglish.com. I'm Holly, and I want to invite you to watch this video for language teachers. Of course, students are welcome to watch as well, but the content will be directed to language teachers, specifically language teachers online. And I invite you to watch this video to hear a discussion between two teachers about lesson planning, trial lessons, teaching styles, and how they are in flux. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion, very informative, especially if you are a new teacher, and even if you are a seasoned teacher, I think you will find some nuggets for yourself as well. And today I am joined by Margarita Sforza, who is from a budding website that will not be named until it is bloomed. So for now, you can find her on LinkedIn, and I will include a link to her profile in the description. Hello, Margarita.
Hello, Holly. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me. Okay,
You're
so
welcome.
let's
My pleasure.
jump. Oh, excuse me.
No, it's okay.
Let's jump right in. And since you are our guest, you will go first. Can you please begin by describing in a general way or specific as you choose your teaching approach? And you can even contrast because you do traditional as well as online teaching, correct?
I do traditional, meaning face-to-face teaching, and online teaching, yes.
Okay, so why don't you describe, maybe highlight the differences between those two approaches for you?
Okay, my face-to-face teaching, I do in small groups and one-on-one. So in small groups, my method, actually, what really the similarity between the small groups and one-to-one is a lot of communication, oral communication, and working on students taking responsibility for their learning. So, in other words, helping my students find what tasks or subjects that they're really interested in, and that really motivate them to progress in English. Is that clear?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, so that's how that's one major similarity between what I do with groups and what I do one-to-one. The one-to-one, I focus a lot more in detail on language coaching. So, because I'm a certified language coach, certified neuro-language coach to be specific, and so we hone in on the students' objectives, and we work on a lot of goal setting together, and what motivates the learner to progress in English, and the same thing on. Work on a lot of communicative learning, and goal setting, motivation, and I'm sorry, I'm missing one. Goal setting, motivation, and yes, and taking responsibility, taking ownership for their learning. So guiding them to taking ownership for their learning to keep them motivated.
Okay. So you basically operate under the idea that for students to own their learning helps them to motivate them. Why do you think that motivates them so much if they own their learning?
Well, because they can, by owning their learning, um, they can identify with it, and that way they're more they'll have the ability to move forward more quickly when something is more, when learning is more tangible for a student. This is what I believe. When learning is more tangible and realistic, they're more likely to stick to it, their commitments, and to continue moving forward, even when they're really busy, even when, you know, when life gets busy or when problems arise in their lives. They're more likely to stick to using their English on a regular basis, or learning something in English every single day.
I see. Okay. Very interesting. And you spoke of particular tasks that keep a student interested and motivated. Can you give us an example of one such task and how that, of course, for confidentiality's sake, I'm not going to ask you to name a student, but can you think of sort of an example of the type of learner that might be motivated by this task?
Okay. Well, the type of activity would differ from student to student, but if I take an example, I guess the most recent example, one of my learners is a lawyer, and he didn't want, and he specifically told me right from the get-go that he did not want to learn any legal terminology or work on any legal contracts, things like that. He really wanted to, he was really looking for speaking about the news, and so he asked me if there was any, what kind of websites he could listen to and things like that. And so I said, well, I have a lot of resources if he wants to work on podcasts. So we worked on news podcasts, and for example, one simple task was he made the commitment to choose a podcast from a list that I made up for him, and that I suggested for him, and he would present it. He would present a summary and commentary every single week, every time we met, and I would simply give him feedback on how he organized his ideas, how he structured his ideas, and we would work on specific language problems that would arise. But I would focus a lot on what he succeeds in doing. I'm going to speak in the present because he's still my student. So we work a lot on what he succeeds in communicating, and I do that in order to build his confidence, because he's really low. He's really low on.
A lot of students are.
Yeah. And the first thing he says is, "I'm terrible at English. I have a horrible accent. No one's going to understand me. Whereas he has a strong intermediate level. So, a technique I enjoyed using is what's called using empathy and positive encouragement is, so telling him just to express himself, with the vocabulary he knows, with the structures he knows, and and just to go ahead and make mistakes, and to communicate a message instead of focusing on how well his English is structured and sounds or would be translated exactly from French, because he's a French speaker. So, so to focus on that first, and then we'd explore. I'd pick like maybe one grammar point and one vocabulary point to work on. That a grammar or vocabulary point that's repetitive. A grammar or vocabulary problem that's repetitive, and we'd work on that for that session. But that's it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of the he's a typical learner of mine. Like, it's a lot of learners I have are like him, and so instead of focusing on all the problems, all the grammar and vocabulary problems he has all at once, I focus more on what's positive about his speech. We even record each other talking, and then that way he can see how well he expresses himself. And then like I said, towards the other half, we would focus on grammar or vocabulary problems that are repetitive, and work on that. And by the end of the session, he feels relieved, like, wow, oh my God, I was able to get through that exercise. And so I usually get quite a positive results that way.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So for me, I have very little experience in the traditional situation, especially as an actual teacher. I have some experience as like an observer, or someone who, student teacher who gave an occasional lesson or partial lesson. And of course, lesson planning was part of my training. But as far as actual teaching and developing an approach, that didn't happen until I landed my first teaching job, and that was online. All three of the jobs that I've had, besides running my website, have been, you can say, online gigs. The differences have been in, I've taught groups and one-on-one. And so the difference is in dynamic, and actually in some ways, this is going to sound lazy, but it's really not. It's actually good. Is that when you teach the groups, you can actually become, if you handle it a certain way, you can become in some ways more of a facilitator.
Yeah.
And so if you have a student, for example, who is very verbal and everything, you can have this student do most of the reading out loud if you're doing an article. And the student who's less of an observer is still following along, and sort of, and you help them catch up, and you help them, you don't vacate your role, but you can, in order to keep all of the students engaged, you basically you delegate some of your role to the student.
Right.
And this is helpful if you have more confident students who aren't as comfortable just sitting back and letting you lecture. You let them take some of those parts, and they're awesome.
And they love the responsibility.
Right, exactly. And then you have the shyer students who are like, oh, good, they're not calling on me. I've actually taught, I was teaching for a long time a group of two, and one of them was more shy, and the other
Mm,
was more talkative and outgoing.
mm,
And I discovered that, I could have the more talkative student give the first examples, and so the shyer
mm,
student had a little time to sort of go, oh, okay.
mm.
And,
And kind of, yeah, you learn, take some examples that they could probably use in their own speech. Yeah.
right, or see how the first example was corrected and get more of an
Mm,
idea of the format, and
yep.
then um, have a little more confidence when they actually speak out and um, uh, put forth an answer. And in the evaluations, I always said that this shyer student seemed to be gaining a little more confidence, and also this shyer student, when he was ready to speak, was actually more willing to go outside of the box and actually say, I wonder if this structure can be applied here. So
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
yeah.
But that is sort of my approach, I guess you would say, is a very, it doesn't have a name. You would almost call it a mix and match, because I don't focus primarily on neurolinguistics. I don't focus primarily on communicative language teaching. I take bits and pieces from different approaches, and one approach might be more heavily focused on with one student, and another approach with another student, because different students have different ways of absorbing, processing, and synthesizing information.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
a little bit like
Oh.
you, finding the activities and tasks that fit each student, but not, you couldn't call what I do neurolinguistics, I don't think.
From what you just described, not really. Well, neurolanguage is understanding how the person's brain learns a language. So neurolanguage coaching is so leading coaching conversations with the individual, using powerful questioning to understand how they learn best, how they learn the language best. So, I think you and I discussed this in yesterday's conversation, how asking the individual how they learn a totally different task, an activity. Were we discussing that yesterday?
Yeah, we were discussing how it's sort of, that's going to come up a little more when we talk about our trial lessons.
Yes, okay.
Which is fine. It's fine to bring up now, but basically it's it's basically asking types of questions to get information about how the student learns in general, and using that information, and specifically, if you can, focusing on things that the student has chosen to learn. I don't always do that, but something that the student has learned well, especially.
I see. Okay.
That they can do well, and then you sort of, by doing so, you can at least construct a working theory as to their learning style, and then it's a process. Throughout the teaching process, you are also discovering more about how the student learns.
So I'm curious, do you, when you discover that within the student, do they, like, do you choose the activities yourself, or do they participate in the choice of activities, or
They do
or documents that you
participate.
choose to. Mhm.
Yeah, they do participate. Sometimes they participate more in the material, sometimes they
Yep.
participate more in the activities.
Right.
Jason Tedick, who is an instructor that I highly respect, you can check out his website, ruletheroom.com,
Okay.
and also his courses on Udemy. One of the things that he says, and I think he's quoting someone else when he says this, no, he's quoting one of his mentors, I believe, and he always says, if you do not share power with your students, they will take it from you.
Ah, yes. Lovely.
Which I have seen happen,
I
especially
totally agree.
in much older students. This is
Yes.
true.
Mm-hmm.
And younger students will do this in other more subtle ways. But so what I do to share choice, I do it in different ways. Sometimes I will choose an activity and I'll say, you know, I think this is going to be good for you. I think you'll enjoy this. And then we have a couple of minutes of feedback at the end of the session, and I'll say, you know, do you think this is useful? And sometimes they'll just say yeah, or sometimes they'll suggest tweaks. If they feel comfortable with me, they'll suggest ways to tweak it. Sometimes the way they participate in the choice of activity is by misunderstanding. Not so much by choice, I don't think, but they misunderstand my directions and then go in a totally, like, not totally
Opposite.
different, but they go on a tangential activity, and it turns out actually to be something cool, and I'll go, oh,
Yeah,
never
that
thought of
wasn't
that
what I was
before. This is
expecting,
good.
but let's
Okay.
continue.
And sometimes I don't let them know that I've never thought it before. I'll just say, oh, okay, do that.
Yeah. That actually sounds better. So let's pursue.
Yeah, let's just go with that. And then
that's
sometimes,
happened to me
depending on
before.
the student, I will tell them, oh, my original plan was this, but you know, I think your idea is better. And, you know, or sometimes I'll tell them, I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you a choice today. We can either continue practicing this thing if you feel like, you know, this thing that we've been learning, if you feel like you need to, or we can do this other thing that I had planned. And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, I'd rather do this. Or they'll ask me a follow-up question. A primary example, last Saturday I was giving a class, and one of the students, he's like, when are we going to play another game? He likes language games.
Okay.
And I said, well, you know, I had something planned, but I'll give you a choice. We can study this grammar point. It was conditionals. It was the first conditional. We can study this, and I have a good game for that. Or we can study this other thing that I had planned. And he asked me, you know, a little more about the other thing that I had planned, and he said, oh, let's play the game.
Okay.
And I said, okay, because it wasn't something that required material or necessarily a lot of prep, and so I was really able to just use that and just go with it.
Okay.
And I said, all right, next class, though, we're going to learn this. And he said, okay, you know, so I share power.
Right. Yeah, so you included him in the choice of activity. But at the same time, yeah, you kind of kept your, I guess, your credibility, I guess, as
and my role.
And your role as a language instructor to guide him through the path, for sure.
Because most of my students, not by targeting necessarily, but by a series of circumstances, most of my students have been from Soviet bloc nations. And in the Soviet bloc nations, the idea is teacher knows best. Especially among your older students from 40s to 60s. I've noticed teachers knows best is very common. And so, but if you gradually share just a little bit of control, they become more comfortable with it. And so you give a small choice, like you say, all right, we're going to do these two activities. Which would you like to do first? but you're still holding that position of authority, and you're saying, we are going to do these two activities. We will. If you want to use the definite, we will do these two.
Yeah.
Because they get picky about that stuff.
Yeah.
Why are you saying going to when will is the definite future? Anyway.
Right. I promise we'll do it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I say, okay, we will do these two activities. Which of them would you prefer to do first? And so you're sharing just a little bit of control, but not so much that they feel like you don't know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the particularities, again, go back to neuro language coaching. One of the particularities of the approach is that learner and coach, well, so the coach and the coachee are at the same level. So there's no like superiority. We're working together towards the same goal in order to kind of, you know, make the learner feel comfortable and at ease, and their learning experience. The idea is that their learning experience will be more efficient that way. So it's just kind of bouncing off what you're saying about kind of sharing I'm quoting you, the control, quote unquote, the control, without really imposing your control as a teacher.
And you find that depending on the culture that you're working with, I find myself, and probably a lot of teachers find, that certain approaches like that need a priming. There's a priming period because, for example, the sharing power.
Yep.
I had a student who was raised in a society where the teacher is the authority and the student does what he's told. Okay. But at the same time, the student and teacher are now, in our case, both adults, and the student is 20 years younger. And so by just sort of priming it, I realized that he was uncomfortable with me sharing too much power. In fact, he told me, he said, you need to be more autocratic. You're too democratic.
Wow.
Which was totally funny. Huh?
How did you react?
I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I can be more autocratic if you need me to. It was uncomfortable, but what I did was started posting a small agenda before the class. I would say, all right, this is the structure. And we wouldn't always follow it because with subconsciously without realizing it, the student, and part of it was me just not being autocratic, we would get started talking in a conversation and the lesson would end up being more conversational. And it was okay because, you know, I do give corrective feedback and different things. So it was still, a learning experience. It was still, you know, useful.
Absolutely.
And he kept coming back. He didn't ask for a refund, so.
Okay. That's a good sign.
Yeah, and, you know, so it worked out, but it was it's a learning experience, and, you know, I feel like for me, there's nothing wrong with me stepping out of my comfort zone and being more autocratic, and there's nothing wrong with him stepping out of his comfort zone and being primed to be comfortable with a share of power. So, you know, we both had an experience. And but it's interesting, that actually brings us to our next topic, because I wanted to sort of go into a little bit of discussion about how the teaching approach, workflow, methods, etc., especially I think when you're working online, but for any teacher, is in flux. It's not static. And I thought we could each talk a little bit about how currently one or more of those things is in flux for each of us. So why don't you go first, because you're the guest.
Oh, thank you. I actually need time to think. I needed time to think about that. You go first.
Would you rather I went first? I'm going to share power here.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, I actually do think.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So for me, the part that is in flux is my workflow situation. So what I have been doing, just by dint of the fact that when I first started, I was fresh out of school pretty much and didn't really have set processes in place, I just jumped in the deep end and tried to catch whatever it was my students threw at me.
Wow.
I developed a teaching style that was very go with the flow of the student and just think, okay, they're struggling with that. Okay, that's good to work on now. That'll be good for this student.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And just for each student doing that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It didn't mean that I never planned. But it just meant that the planning was not done very far in advance, and the workflow was very time consuming, and is really, because it's in flux. This kind of workflow is very time consuming because if you have 6 students 2 days from now, you're planning 6 individual lessons.
Yep.
Like a middle school teacher, you know what I mean? And this can be very, very time consuming, and it's less freeing. And you can recycle once you get a few lessons under your belt, a few different kinds of lessons. You can begin recycling if a student is struggling with the same thing that so and so did last month. Oh, okay. Take this lesson plan, make a few tweaks. We're good.
Yeah, and mainly you're talking about like grammar lessons, yeah?
Grammar lessons, speaking. Again, I tried to catch whatever my students threw at me. So, and one of my jobs didn't really give me a choice. They're like, teach English, and so it was teach reading, teach writing if that's what the student needs, teach this, teach that. I didn't know the first thing about niching down. I didn't even know that was allowed.
Oh my God, okay, yeah.
So now that's another thing that has been, it's not in flux anymore. It will be, because I hope to widen, but what I did was I finally was able to ask myself, okay, what do I feel the most competent, not confident, what do I feel the most competent, which encompasses confidence, I guess. What do I feel the most, ready and able to competently teach students? And my answer was speaking and grammar. And so that is my
They go hand in hand.
They do. They do. Well, that depends on who you ask, because you have the fluency and accuracy camps. But I'm one of those people that can never seem to be one thing or the other. So in a lot of things. So I'm very much that accuracy can actually, lack of accuracy can end up limiting fluency if left untouched. So
absolutely.
So yes, and I tend to, for whatever reason, attract a lot of students who want grammar. So there you go. And I now enjoy it. So it's very, And also what I noticed was I got a lot of learners and get a lot of learners like you that say, oh, I'm terrible. My English is terrible. And they'll say, oh, I'm a beginner. And you listen to them talk and you're like,
Mm.
no, you're intermediate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and then just like helping them see that. Helping them
Right,
see that. And,
right. And I'm very much like you as far as focusing on, I don't, I'm not as heavy with that as you are probably, but I try to find at least a couple of things to tell the student, all right, this is what's good.
mm,
This is what's good maybe is this is what is,
clear or
yeah, good is
understandable.
the word I use, but I'm not finding a better one right now. Um, this is what's working for
Mm,
you, and this is what we need to improve. These are
hmm.
some of the things we need to improve, and just trying to highlight, even if it's a small thing like, your R's are awesome, which in American English is a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, but what's in flux right now is my planning workflow. So
Mm,
I have recently purchased a toolkit by Elena Mutanano, which some of our audience will recognize the name. She has
okay.
a toolkit about developing customized packages and developing syllabi,
Really?
which
Okay.
is something I've been kind of looking for, or at least something similar to help my planning workflow for a
Yep.
while now. Because I knew what wasn't working, but I didn't quite know how to fix it.
Mm,
So I'm not necessarily totally following her plan, but she got me thinking in the right direction. And so I took what I could from her plan and then adapted things to my current situation. And
mm,
so what I am slowly developing are syllabi skeletons
mm-hmm.
that I can then tweak and change per student, and also developing package descriptions that incorporate the different lesson types. So a
Mm-hmm.
primary example is that a 10-lesson package will include, if you're a new student, an
Yep.
exploration session,
Mm-hmm.
which is where we continue getting to know each other and each other's learning and teaching styles.
Mm-hmm.
6 grammar/speaking/pronunciation lessons, depending on the student's goals.
Mm-hmm.
2, what is it? Sorry, yeah, 2 open sessions which are negotiated between myself and the student. So if we realize, oh, this student needs more practice here, we discuss and I say, all right, for the open session, we're going to do this. Or the student can say, hey, I want a whole session that's conversation. And so, oh, okay, it's an open session, right? It
Okay, so
leaves
open on
that
any topic you can.
flexibility, right? It's an open topic, I should say.
Yep.
That's probably what I should start calling it. Open topic session. So
Mm,
it allows that necessary flexibility so that things aren't too rigid. And then one session in a 10-session package is primarily vocabulary strategy based,
mm-hmm.
where we practice a task or two that can be used for the student if he or she wants to. Microphone glitch.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry. Yeah, there was. There we go. We okay there?
yeah, we're good.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
If the student wants vocabulary, then we have that session to focus on vocabulary tasks, because vocabulary is very tough to diagnose what the student needs and doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll go with a word and I'll start to explain it to a student, and the student will say, oh yeah, I know that word.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas another student would be like, what does that mean? So it's
Right.
very hard to diagnose.
That's true because they could be at the same level, but yeah, depending on the subject area of the word, depend on what they're going to understand.
Right. So what is in flux is, before it was like, okay, you pay for 10 hours with me. And there wasn't really, and I've been getting a lot of questions in the trial lessons lately. What do your lessons look like? What are they like? And so now I've got something to kind of point to and tell them, all right, the first lesson will be this, and you will be receiving a syllabus. And the syllabus, realizing that the syllabus isn't carved in rock.
Right.
I can, you know, this is a new thing for me, having structured packages. So I can sort of revisit the issue.
Right.
So what is Influx for you? Sorry? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'd have to say that I'm quite pretty much in the same situation as you, and in the sense of, well, what's in flux for me is the content of each of my lessons. Although, if I have at the same time, if I have intermediate level, like B1 level, B2 level. Are you familiar with the Common
I'm not as familiar with it as I am with the ACTFL, which is the American sort of thing, but I'm familiar enough with it.
Okay, I think it's a level 3 in the American level. Anyways, intermediate to upper intermediate. There's the same language requirements for that level, but I'm more in flux with the actual the situations in which the learner wants to be proficient. So let's say I have, because I work with a lot with professionals. So if I'm working with a salesperson and I have a whole bunch of salespeople, well, at some point they'll all want to be able to be proficient in giving presentations at a conference or a fair. So that would be something that would be reoccurring. That would be like a lesson plan that I could kind of recycle. But other than that, a lot of my learners would have different specific situations in which they want to be proficient. So I'm constantly kind of renewing or preparing to adapt the exercises to the needs of the student.
I see. Yeah, so you're learning, you're sort of trying to develop, you're trying to put a framework in place where you can be that flexible.
Right. So my package is starting to kind of take form. So I'm starting with presenting kind of like like a package, a minimum package deal, which includes, which always includes a like initial interview placement of about an hour and a half, where I explain what language coaching is, where we do. We have a conversation where we identify. We do like a placement test, like an initial placement test, orally, and then there's a feedback session. We establish the learner's goals together, their grammar vocabulary goals, and then their situational goals. So the situations in which they want to use the grammar, or they want to be proficient in the language. Um, we establish the action steps together, their motivation, and then our sessions together. So so I'm that's constant with everyone when I work one-on-one with someone. But yeah, what I'm kind of needing structure now, or needing, what I'm working on is offering a full package to say, okay, when you work with me, this is, so many hours gets you this, so many hours gets you this. So I'm kind of gearing towards more saying this is an example package that I would put together for this kind of student, and then this is an example package for another kind of student, without making that etched in stone, saying this is one size fits all. So
Right.
I kind of that's not my approach. One size fits all. Like, here's a program, like, whatever. Here's 50 hours. Okay, in 50 hours you'll be able to do this. Well, it all depends on how.
Yeah. Totally.
So that's why I'm struggling with kind of offering a package with so many hours at this price, because of that particular approach.
So developing sort of that, if you have a framework that can be built on, and almost like the the architecture, where you have the basic building design, and then sometimes you take things out, sometimes you for example, I have students who want homework. I offer homework upon request. And so students, if they want homework, they get it. If they don't want homework, they don't get it, because it's a waste of my time to produce it if they're not going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a wonderful approach you have, because like you said, if you're not going to get the input from their side, well, the homework is just a piece of paper or whatever, or just an activity that just sits there.
Right.
It becomes irrelevant.
My door just blew open. I'm going to shut it.
Okay.
It.
You have the wind blowing. I have the sun beaming in my eye.
Oh goodness,
Yeah, it's nice, but I'm just trying to step aside from it once in a while.
Oh. Is the sun, I'm sorry, is the lighting kind of, the environment I have, the lighting is a little more difficult to control, so,
No, your lighting looks great.
Then I'm a little confused. What is it? Are you?
For me, no, for me, like, where I'm sitting, the sun is beaming in, so I have half my face, just to describe to you, I have half my face in sunlight, and the other half well, not in darkness, but in the shade. So
a little less, yeah. Very cool. People who have watched these videos from the beginning would tell you that I kind of adopt an informal style. I mean, of course, we don't want to be goofing off and all that, but it's very relaxed and kind of it's less formal than a lot of videos because that's the way I like it, and it's my channel.
Yeah, exactly, and you have the right to. No, and I can identify to that. So I use it with my learners. So
that's very cool. Yeah, I have learners who insist on calling me teacher, and I have learners who love calling me Holly. So I don't care. Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't care.
And so they call you just teacher? Like, hello, teacher?
Or they call me Teacher Holly.
Really? Okay. Hence your Teacher Holly title.
Right. Exactly. Because I have learners from, as I said, the Soviet bloc. Now they like calling me Holly, but I have had learners from South America who just cannot bring themselves to call me Holly. So, and I don't care. I mean, as long as you're not being actually overtly disrespectful, because we should be respectful to each other.
Absolutely.
I don't care.
That's true.
we're
Yeah,
adults.
it's not
So,
insulting to call you that. So
right, it's not
yeah,
insulting to call me Holly. It's not insulting to call me teacher. That's what I am.
yeah, exactly. That's true. That's true.
But as far as just to, I know we're getting a bit long-winded, but I think there's a lot of good content here. So,
Yeah,
um,
there
in
is.
terms of the package, there's this whole idea of the trial lesson. And so, if you prefer that I go first, again, I will. I'm going to share power, or you can go first. I'd like to sort of talk, generally speaking, about how each of us conduct a trial lesson, because there are a lot of questions in the group that we belong to, a lot of questions people ask about free, how long, what do you do?
Mm.
So I can say mine is free. I used to offer 45 minutes. Now it's 30. It
Mm-hmm.
often ends up taking 45. I don't care. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, uh, you know, it it is very much. I'm planning to stop calling it a trial lesson because it
Mm.
really doesn't present itself like a lesson.
That was going to be
Um,
my question, if you don't mind me interrupting.
mhm.
That was going to be my question. Like, is it an actual lesson? Because mine
No,
isn't. Like, mine's more like of an initial contact, an initial interview.
right.
Um, yeah, in French I call it une prise de contact.
Increase the contact.
Une
Okay.
prise de contact, so like first contact or first
Oh, increase. Okay, I heard a different
prise with a
consonant.
p,
Uh-huh.
with a p
Oh, good grief.
de
All right,
contact.
maybe I
It's
need to
okay.
check my ears.
Prise de contact.
Ne parlez pas français. I don't speak French.
Oh, your accent is pretty good so
Thank you.
far.
Yeah, we discussed that we discussed that yesterday. We
Yep.
discussed the interesting phenomenon of good pronunciation automatically makes people think that you have good whatever Russian or
Yep.
Spanish or
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
So, you were saying.
So the
Hmm.
trial lesson, oi,
Yeah.
the the trial lesson is very much where I explain. It's more of a get to know you slash initial goal setting. So, you know, that's where I ask some of those pertinent questions of, and if they don't get covered in the lesson, in the trial, they get covered during the exploration session. Those questions of what, how have you studied English in the past? What worked for you? What didn't?
Mm.
That's a question I've started asking. Sort of, what was good? I simplified. Oh goodness, I've got 5 minutes. Oi, till my next class.
Ooh.
All right, quick. I've started asking this question, and then basically, what's good about your history? What's not? What wasn't?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And where do you want to go? What makes a good speaker? Because this clues me in sort of how do you know that someone speaks English well? And this clues me in,
Mm-hmm.
according to Jason Tiedick and Simon Sinich,
Mm-hmm.
what do they really want to know? Where do they want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they get to ask me questions. They tell me a little bit about themselves so I can start sort of identifying some of the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, it's your go because
Yep.
I'm about to teach.
Quite similar. Like I said, I don't present it as a trial lesson because it isn't a lesson. Like they're not, right? It's not how our lessons would normally present themselves. It's a first contact where, like I said earlier, I talk to them about what neuro-language coaching is. So, so I present myself and the approach, and then have a kind of like a placement conversation, and then feedback from them, from myself, after that placement test, and then goal setting together, where I ask them questions about their goals, their motivations, and then we set out an action plan together on their grammar goals, the grammar and vocabulary, and then the situations in which they wish to be proficient. So the next steps. So that's usually what I offer for the first session, what I have been offering for their first free session, which is supposed to last a full hour. And so I'm considering reducing it and offering just half an hour, just in order to get that commitment from the learner to sign on. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, I've been finding a lot of people, I'll do the hour and then whatever, they don't have I find out at the end they don't have the finances or
oh gosh,
or whatever to pursue. So
yeah.
I spend that whole hour.
I've even thought of charging for that reason, so I can, some of our compatriots talk about charging for the trial lesson just to get people, get people to realize that this is something that they need to pay for.
Yeah. So something I'm exploring is to kind of, either like reduce it to half an hour, still having, an initial contact, or sending them like a free resource.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's actually a very good
free resource to how to set goals, for example, right? And then we can explore that together in our first lessons or something. Anyways, it's
very cool.
Kind of up in the, my ideas are all over the place since I haven't. Yeah, influx, exactly.
Right. Well, so, Margarita, it has been an absolute pleasure having you. As I've said, I do have to teach. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to have you on again. I think having a panel discussion between us and some other teachers about goal setting, because that's something I struggle with. I struggle with helping my students set goals because a lot of them tend to expect me to do that. And so it would be really interesting to talk about
it's challenging.
It is very challenging. Different approaches to that, and also lesson planning, a lot of good materials. So perhaps we'll have to have another discussion, but it has been a pleasure, and I want to say to our audience, thank you for watching, and Margarita, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. It was wonderful.
And
another one together.
Margarita, I apologize. I'm feeling a little rushed.
No problem.
I want to say thank you again for watching. Margarita can be found on LinkedIn until her budding website blooms. Like the beautiful flower, I'm sure it will be. And you can find me on hollytreeenglish.com. That's hollytreeenglish.com, spelled exactly like it sounds. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.